Welcome back to Slothbox. I'm Lyndon Dixon, and today I'm joined again by one of my favourites, former professional boxer and one of the world's leading promoters, Dmitry Salita. Dmitry, how are you?
I'm doing great, and you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. Firstly, before we get into everything else, how's life? How's boxing? I know you're always busy. How's it going?
Boxing is good. Boxing is going through a bit of a transition period.
Mm,
It's a bit of a challenging time with Showtime announcing that they're getting out of the sport. They've obviously been a tremendous force in the sport of boxing. HBO left some years ago, and now it's Showtime,
mm,
and it's an interesting and in some ways challenging time for the sport of boxing. But looking to think outside the box and making sure that the sport of boxing and the fighters that we work with, as well as those that we don't work with, stay engaged
mm,
and motivated to continue perfecting their craft and making the biggest and the best fights for the fans.
mm. Well, now let's talk about you. I want to talk about some of your favourite fighters, but firstly, the first favourite fighter I want to know is who did you look up to the most as a kid growing up, as a young fighter, as an amateur? Who was your favorite? Who was your idol as a kid?
That, that's a great question. So I really looked up and emulated a lot of Oscar De La Hoya because this
Mm,
was in the mid-90s. He was a sensational, phenomenal fighter. I loved watching Roy Jones, but Roy Jones was uh, just so talented and so incredible that he was very difficult to emulate.
mm,
There was a period of time in the Junior Olympics that when I used to fight in the national tournaments that so many fighters would try to emulate Roy Jones. But I remember watching the great fights of Oscar. I just watched his documentary on HBO a couple of weeks ago, and in my opinion, the best trainer that he's had for a significant amount of time was Gennaro Hernandez, the professor from Mexico.
mm,
And when he fought Julio Cesar Chavez the first time, and after that, when he fought Miguel Angel Gonzalez, it was just picture perfect. His footwork, his jab, his fakes, his boxing ability. It was really incredible. Those are the two guys that I really looked up to closely. But there were other great fighters in that era that certainly, uh, made you love the sport of boxing. I remember rushing home after the boxing gym to watch HBO boxing, uh, on Saturday night. It was just incredible time for boxing,
mm.
and these two uh, behemoths of networks, HBO, Showtime, getting out of the sport is really significant,
Mm,
and we'll see what the next chapter will bring.
mm. Well, I want to talk a little bit more into the present now. Who's one of your favourite fighters to watch now? Who do you look at and think, wow, you are one hell of a fighter?
Well, I love watching Clarissa Shields because she's really incredible.
I had a feeling you was going to say that.
Yeah, because she's she's the first, and there will never be another one like her
Mm,
for what she's done for boxing and for women's empowerment throughout the world. And obviously, with her success in a ring, traveling thousands of miles away from home, going to Savannah Marshall's home country, and putting on just a masterclass of a performance. And what a great fight it was.
mm,
Uh, Terence Crawford, technically speaking, I would say Terence Crawford is the best fighter in the world today. He is technically sound and innovative and just a really incredible fighter. So I love watching Terence. Uh, Lomachenko some years ago was very fun to watch, just from a purely boxing point of view.
yeah.
Not a guy that gets into a slugfest, but someone that's very methodical and technical and tactical. And so he was always great to watch. Tyson Fury, I love watching Tyson Fury's fights. He's very exciting. Trained with my good friend and great trainer Sugar Hill Stewart, who really upgraded his game and is really making him live up to his potential. And I believe that there's a lot more.
Mm,
But it's a little bit connected because the previous era of boxing and this era of boxing is not so far apart. And one of the things that I see now, which I can't say that I'm a fan of, is influencer boxing.
mm,
Nick Paul, you have to give him credit because he's really trying and he's really conducting serious training camps and training hard and wanting to learn boxing. So he's a guy. But then there's a bunch of other guys that are not really giving the respect to the craft of boxing. and just because of their popularity on Instagram and Twitter, are able to get significant opportunities in the ring. That does not signify boxing. One
Mm,
of the reasons that is happening is because, as an example, HBO was a great storyteller. 24/7. I remember I used to enjoy 24/7 fights more than the fights because they were so incredible and so.
exactly.
And so the real fighters used to be the influencers. The real fighters would walk down the street, people would recognize them and ask them for autographs and ask them what restaurant they eat in because they want to emulate them, because they want to be like them. But today, because the storytelling component of boxing is dwindling, we're looking towards influencers, folks that are known because of different things they do, not in the sport of boxing, not because they won the nationals and because they fought in the Olympics and because they were multi-time amateur boxing world champions, but because they have 1 million followers on Instagram or
Mm,
7 million, 3 million, or 500,000, and because they can do a stunt that has nothing to do with boxing. And so, I feel like boxing at its purest form, when uh, accomplished, skilled fighters fight each other, the whole world wants to stop and watch them.
yeah.
And boxing is a very tough sport. There's no sport that's as tough as boxing, and there's a reason why different fighters chose this path. And those stories should be told and could be told in a dramatic way that engages the common sports fan. So I really believe that the next chapter in the sport, that that that's one of the key factors in making sure that the sport grows and that the fan base follows.
Mm. For me, I completely agree with everything you just said there. Just like this influencer boxing stuff, in my opinion, it sort of resembles, well, it mirrors how society is going, how people in the younger generation consume their media. Everything's so short, it's limited. You forget about it the next day. You've got TikTok, Instagram. It's a 10-second video and it's gone. And that's what this influencer boxing is. There was the whole KSI Tommy Fury card. Other than that fight, anyone that watched that card, you couldn't tell me who else was on there because it's gone, it's forgotten. The quality was that low. It's
Yeah.
just
Well,
an
oh,
afterthought afterwards. Whereas
yeah.
compared to what you just said, the 24/7 stuff, the stories of these people that have been through so much tough times in their life just to get to that
Yeah.
position, that's not being told. And like you say, we need to get back to that storytelling aspect of boxing because for me, that's one of its greatest selling points.
One of the reasons why Canelo is such a big star still is because of the stories that were told uh, on him and because of the brand that was built and the drama with Golovkin and some of the other big fights that he's had. So he's still living off of that. Um, so let's see how the sport turns. I feel that I'm one of the players in it. The other thing that we need to do as a boxing community is that we need to look beyond ourselves. One of the things that is happening now is because promoters just looked at their own direct benefit to their business.
Yes.
Uh, the sport stopped growing. Amateur boxing program is not as strong as it used to be. The Golden Gloves, the Nationals, there is no glory in it anymore. And the football league, the NFL here in the United States, the basketball league, they look to encourage young athletes through different programs, through high schools, through colleges. So boxing used to be that way, but not that way anymore.
Mm.
And it's all connected because trainers, boxing managers, gyms, the whole infrastructure is affected by that, and it is a bit of a trickle down effect. So we as the boxing business community, and I love the sport of boxing. I grew up as a fighter, and that's really why I'm in it, because I love the sport of boxing, and I really feel and want to contribute to it in a meaningful way that I believe that I have, the mind and the experience and the knowledge to do. But also, promoters need to work with each other, regardless if they don't like it. If I don't like the shirt you wear, I don't like what you said. You need to make the biggest and the best fights, and that's because fighters' career is finite. So they need to have the biggest and the best opportunities, and because the boxing fans want to see the best fight the best, and that's the way that the sport will grow. People always ask me, the UFC is overtaking boxing. I don't think the UFC is overtaking boxing. from a financial point of view, I don't think that
Yeah,
that those events generate as much money as big boxing fights. Uh, I don't think overall as many people tune in that as they tune into boxing, but they do a great job of telling stories. And they're really one entity. There's the PFL, there's Bellator that are kind of inching in, but the UFC really does a great job of promoting their athletes and making them superstars and telling their stories. And but I believe that I have a lot of respect for the guys that get into the octagon. However, there's nothing like boxing, and it all
agreed.
UFC is a cousin of boxing. Influence of boxing is a distant cousin of boxing.
Mm,
But the pure and the best and the ones that can do it at the highest level, that's what it's all about. And that's what I grew up with. And I believe that if you don't water it down, but if you give the best pure product, that fans will tune in and will watch it with fever and real intent.
mm. Well, moving on from that, the situation of boxing currently, I want to talk about the past a little bit and nostalgically talk about what could have been and what we never saw. I want to talk about some fights that we never got to see happen for one reason or another. Maybe they're from a different generation, who knows? But in these fights, hypothetically, they're all in their prime. The first one I want to talk to you about and get a bit of analysis is Vitaly Klitschko against Evander Holyfield. How do you think that would have went down?
That's a great fight. Um, mm, well, Evander Holyfield, he had ups and downs in his career,
Yeah,
but the Evander Holyfield that gave Lennox Lewis all he can handle, and the beat Riddick Bowe in those classic fights, uh, great fight. But I believe that another guy that came up through the amateur boxing program when amateur boxing was glorified. I believe he was an Olympic bronze medalist, and great fight. Uh, Great fight. Let's talk about these fights, not pick a winner.
yeah,
No, because Vitaly Klitschko, he's a political leader now, and
yeah.
he's doing a lot for his people. But uh, Evander Holyfield was a great beat Mike Tyson.
Mm,
Uh, really, when he was such a big underdog. So, this is what I say about great fighters. Great fighters, towards the end of their career, they still have one fight left, and Evander Holyfield is a great example of that. But there are several, but he's a great example of that.
mm,
Marco Antonio Barrera lost several fights, then came back to beat Prince Hamed. Another great example. But there are several.
mm. Well, the next one I want to ask you about is what I think would have been a great fight. I mean, I know there was negotiations to see it, but I think some of the investors pulled out. Larry Holmes against George Foreman, two
Ooh.
greats of the sport, let alone the heavyweight
Well, yeah,
scene.
but they're the peaks of their careers. George Foreman that came back. I know Larry Holmes fought a little bit in the '90s,
Yeah,
but the George Foreman of the '90s, I believe, would have beaten Larry Holmes in the '90s. The
yeah.
George Foreman was in the peak of their career. Great fight because Larry Holmes had a great chin, great jab, could box. Um, Very interesting fight. Great fight. Yeah.
What do you think the game plan would have been from Holmes's perspective?
Well, I think Holmes had a great jab, a great jab, very educated. And when I say very educated jab, that means the jab can be thrown in so many different ways. There's a jab that can be thrown from the hip in many different ways, different variations. There's a defensive jab, there's an offensive jab. Oscar De La Hoya had a jab that was like a right hand. I believe he knocked fighters down with a jab. So Larry Holmes had a really phenomenal jab. And uh, and George Foreman had it in the second part of his career, had the unusual cross arm type of defense that deflected a lot of punches. So one of the reasons why it worked for him is because he was a big guy and he had big hands and
Yeah,
he was able to protect himself that type of way. He's also uh, was trained by great fighters. I believe Jersey Joe Walcott was in his corner, Angelo Dundee, and because George Foreman and Larry Holmes too, such great boxing minds. George Foreman, he didn't use Angelo Dundee in training camp. Training camp, he used different guys, but for the corner, he used Angelo Dundee because he believed that Angelo had a great eye. He was a great motivator, saw what was happening in the ring, in the fight, and was able to convey that information in a useful way to George. And that's a big deal. That's a big
yeah.
deal. especially when when the going gets tough and a fight is evenly matched. So yeah.
Well, the next one and the last one, we technically did get to see this fight. It was in Ocean's 11, so we didn't quite get to see it in real life. It's Lennox Lewis against Vladimir Klitschko. Lennox Lewis, one of my favourites of all time, but again, so is Vladimir Klitschko. So,
Yeah.
how would you see that one?
Hard to pick because one of the reasons why both of them were so great is because they had Emmanuel Stewart in their corner,
Mm,
and both had real downs in their career. Lennox Lewis getting knocked out by Oliver McCall, and then coming back and restructuring his career and resurrecting it to go on to being one of the all-time heavyweight greats. Same thing with Vladimir. He lost a couple of times. He lost in
yeah,
the Ukraine, and then he lost to uh, uh, he lost to the name escapes my mind, but he also lost to Las Vegas in HBO. Uh, and I believe that Emmanuel deserves all the credit for being able to reshape him
yeah,
and make sure that he uses his strengths and hides his weaknesses. So those are great fights where you can't pick a winner, but uh, yeah, very very good matchups and would have been great for the sport of boxing. And hopefully these days we can make some of these fights, and looks like some of the heavyweight fights are on their way to being made. I'm not so sure that Deontay Wilder versus Anthony Joshua is going to get made,
mm.
but I hope it does.
Do you think that's a fight we'll ever see, Anthony Joshua against Deontay Wilder? Because I mean, Eddie Hearn sort of spoke about that a lot this year, and then here we are in October, and he said it's pretty much not going to happen
Well,
next, at least.
it's been talked about for a long time.
Yeah,
Eddie uh, has the gift of gab and is able to sell fights in a great way. So like Emmanuel Stewart is responsible for resurrecting uh, Vladimir Klitschko and Lennox Lewis. Eddie Hearn is responsible for resurrecting Anthony Joshua
yeah,
as heavyweight and really attaching his name to guys like Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. And don't get me wrong, I like Anthony Joshua a lot. He is a great fighter and did a lot for the sport of boxing, and is a great person. I like him a lot. He's very positive, um, and again, very very really what you want a heavyweight champion to be. But from his last several performances, I do not see him competing with the elite Deontay Wilder. With that
yeah,
being said, we only seen one round of Deontay Wilder, and Malik Scott did a great job and seems to have done a great job in rebuilding Deontay Wilder as well. Um, he did as well as he could do against Tyson Fury in his third fight. He changed some things, and I believe that mentally Malik worked on his mind to make sure that he's strong enough to be able to endure Tyson Fury, and he did he did a great job, and he put up a better fight than I thought he would.
mm,
And then in his last fight, which was more than a year ago, he won by first round knockout, which also looked good. So I would have to pick Deontay Wilder as the favorite, but whatever it is, it's a great fight, and I think that it has to happen uh, for the sport of boxing to be healthy and for it to grow. It's kind of like interesting, right? Because all of these big fights get made, like Usyk versus Tyson Fury, and this year so these great fights with Gervonta Davis and Ryan Garcia. Canelo had some great fights, and these big networks are pulling out of the sport. We're talking about Showtime, so it's a bit odd because someone who's at the head of the ship. This I say this about the new owners of the new company that owns all Showtime. They really don't have any passion or any
no,
understanding of boxing. I think Steven loves the sport of boxing. And he did the best he could with what he was given, and he and yeah, and he loves boxing, and he did good for the sport. But when people that kind of dictate what could and can't be done don't like the sport and kind of shut up the lights, there's nothing you could do.
mm,
So uh, always there's always boxing always survives, and I really believe that it shouldn't survive. It should prosper and grow and learn from from the mistakes that were made, and develop into a major sport. I know it's a major sport in the UK, but it has its ups and downs in the United States, and meaning it's up when big fights get made, it's up, but when good fights get made, many people don't know about it. And I believe that should not happen going forward.
Well, the last question from me. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always, to speak to you. But I just want to talk about what you got going on next. We said at the start of the interview, we know you're a busy man. So tell us about your schedule and your fighters and what they're up to.
Well, we have Joshua Pagan fighting this Saturday. He's an upcoming undefeated junior welterweight prospect. He's U.S. national champion, 8-0 as a fighter. This is going to be his 5th fight this calendar year, which is incredible.
Wow.
I really believe keeping my fighters busy. Then we have Shojikan Ergashev fighting for the world title against Sabio Matias on the Andrade Benavidez undercard. That's a good fight, and I really believe that Ergashev is one of the biggest punchers in the sport of boxing, and a good boxer who's learning a lot under Sugar Hill and Theo Chambers. So those are the things that we have coming up. We were supposed to have a show box before the end of the year, but unfortunately that shop is closed. So we got to restructure and rethink and think about making an output deal with a broadcaster that will give our fighters an opportunity to progress themselves and establish themselves as stars in a consistent way. I do want to say that while I do represent a lot of very good fighters, I did this without a TV deal. I do not have a TV deal.
Exactly.
I picked the fighters, and then based on their talent and based on the marketing that we did, I actually promote fights. I don't make deals with a venue where they give me an X amount of money, and I don't care if they sell tickets or not. I hire publicists. I work together with strategic partners to make sure that the fighters' names and our events get promoted in a real way, and that makes the sport of boxing grow. Clarissa Shield, as an example, Clarissa, in her 2nd professional fight, sold out venues. She sold out a venue in Detroit, and she's done it consistently. We've had an event at Little Caesars with her on June 3rd. There were like 11,500 people in the building. That's incredible. She's only like 12-0. So that's a big deal. And when I get a TV deal, the boxing community and the fighters I work with will benefit from it. And one of the things that I want to say is that I'm about being inclusive. I believe that the sport of boxing needs to be inclusive.
Definitely.
And regardless of who likes who and who doesn't like who, I think that we have to look beyond ourselves and look for the interest of the sport and be communally responsible. Communally responsible means care about the growth of the sport of boxing, care about the amateur boxing program, care about the gyms, care about the young fighters. During COVID, there were only few people that had an opportunity to do events, and we were one of them. And during that time, I reached out to the promoters that had difficulty, and I said, you know what, let's try to make some fights together, so that your fighters can get work, so that their companies can make some money, and the doors can stay open. But a lot of times we talk about exclusive. Oh, this is exclusive. This is exclusive. That's not the way to go, man. No. Inclusive is the way to go. Not exclusive, inclusive. And it seems like the zone is opening up its doors and is being inclusive and working with different promoters and wants the sport of boxing to grow. And I hope that it continues and it gets organized in a way that benefits the sport of boxing.
Well, like I said a little earlier on, it is always a pleasure to speak to you, but we're going to wrap it up there.
Goes both ways, man. You ask good questions.
Thank you, mate. But yeah, I've been Lyndon Dixon. He's been Dmitry Salita, and we will see you on the next one.
Before you go, I do want to say one thing. So, Matchroom and Eddie hired our company to do his first 2 events in the United States before the zone, the first 2 events on HBO. And I spent a lot of time with Eddie and with Frank Smith, who I have a lot of respect for. He's wonderful. Yeah. And last year, we had like many fights in the UK with Clarissa. She's fought there twice. And then with Jermaine Franklin. And we've been there for press conferences. So now when people ask me how you doing, I say, everything's good, mate. So mate, I want to tell you, mate made it into my vocabulary.
Yeah,
so, right.
You picked it up.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, mate, thank you so much for your time today. And yeah, like I said, it's always a pleasure, and I can't wait to do it again.
So when I used to speak to Eddie, and he would say, "Mate," I said, "When you're in the United States, all right, man. You're in
Yeah.
Brooklyn, man. Come on, man."
But anyway,
so
right.
so so that's part of being inclusive. We have to rub off on each other
Exactly.
and adopt different things and work together.
Mm.
And as Don King used to say, only in America, baby.
But anyway, Dmitry, thank you so much for your time. And like I said, can't wait to do it again. You take it easy, and we will see you on the next one.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, thank you, mate.